Hello, this is Bill again. Welcome to visualization. We were preceded by volume or module 2, which is raison d'être. There's another way of saying our reason for being, which was lettering and the importance of lettering. Now we're into visualization. And visualization, I borrowed this so many years ago, I don't even know where it comes from. It was just a general, it was not attributed to anybody, but it hung on, and I used it as sort of as my model, an extended model. To learn to draw, it is very necessary to learn to see. To learn to see, it is necessary to learn to look. To learn to look, it is first necessary to learn what to look for. To understand what is seen, it is necessary to learn the basic principles involved in seeing. Drawing is a simple process of interpreting graphically what is seen and what is known. Knowledge and learned skills are responsible for good drawings. Practice is responsible for better ones. And if I had to add something into the sign industry, give me a good survey. And I'll be able to apply all of that above and do a good job. Now, we have to get a little scientific. And what do we mean by seeing? Well, we have to, the pictorial representations, the maximum cone of vision, and that's what we're going to focus of. You're not going to try and paint and draw and do things that you can't see. It's always within your cone of vision. Visualization by architects. No architect starts directly into this fait accompli or the actual drawing or structure that he's going to build. He has some idea in mind, and he has to deal with light and shadows and shapes and forms, incorporated into his little dreams. He puts in the obstructions that are necessary to support his dreams. And I've taken this out of one of my old books, almost as old as me, that shows some of these renderings by architects before even they get down. And I put some of their names, Louis Kahn. These are stars from the past in the world of architecture. And some of them are really classic and just as renderings for themselves. They're artworks in themselves. But these are the visions that the architect sees before he gets and presents it to his customer. Some of them, they try to evoke that spirit, whether it's a church or he has to understand history. He has to understand the history of cathedrals and so on. He uses that as his backdrop to create these shapes. Again, there's a classic element in everything, arches, so almost a necessity for architects to understand, but in context of a spatial area, that this is what he has to see before he puts it down and creates something. And that's what is important when you're visualizing. Here are some other examples. Architects will, and they do visualize what a storefront should look like. This is something out of the 30s and 40s and the 50s, what the interior will look like. Again, they will incorporate visual elements, whether they're statues, suspended statues, or even signs. Architects think of all of the elements that go into the environment of his creation. And nothing is left to chance, including tapestry when it's required as a focal point for a church or a synagogue. Here's the quick strokes of a brush and a pen, and then the ultimate realization in structural terms that he and an engineer will argue over, amicably, of course. Here's another beautiful shot of just how abstract something can look and end up being a reality. The human eye is a light sensing organ. Light must be present for it to be able to see. To activate that light must strike. No light, you can't see it. Now here's light is the basis of all seeing. The sun is the planet's primary light source. Light travels from the sun in straight lines known as light rays. Light rays cannot change direction unless they strike a reflector of some kind. Light rays cannot penetrate solid, opaque matter, resulting in shade and shadows. Those are the essence of what you have to remember. And all materials are capable of reflecting light rays to some degree. Any given material of light value is capable of reflecting more light than the same material at a darker value. All colors with the exception of black are capable of reflecting some lights. Light colors, that is white, yellow, pink, yellow and green, yellow, orange, reflect more light than darker ones. Dark blue, dark green, and dark red. This is just a simple way of describing what we just discussed. Light rays from the sun and artificial light sources differ only in one respect. Light rays from the sun travel in straight parallel lines, whereas light rays from the simple artificial light source radiate from a point. The divergence that you see here clearly shows how this changes when you have a specific light source, the way the shadows and the light source distribute the shades. From the doodler to artist and set designer. Now, we all familiar with Steven Spielberg. We know him as a director. We don't know him as an artist, and he is not an artist. But he has made it a point, and he has learned how to communicate with designers by doodling simple concepts. Here's an example. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. He actually doodles, he wants a concept, and he's trying to explain that to his designer, to his set people, what he wants, the scene that he envisages. A horse interrupting a meeting around tribespeople. He then has his doodle done and translated by a designer who does the actual scene and will do the storyboard. Secondhand observations, and here I injected a little bit of humor based on historical myth, and it has never really been confirmed. But the story goes that Napoleon Bonaparte, at the Battle of Waterloo, suffered terribly from hemorrhoids that prevented him from sitting on his horse and looking at the battle. Now, he was an extraordinary strategist and tactician. And for him to be effective, he had to see the overall battleground, the complete battleground, so that he can make directions and instant decisions as to how to move his troops and so on. Because of his debilitated state, he had to sit on a donut cushion and have this translated and transmitted, the battle scene transmitted by a younger officer. And you could imagine the scene. This was secondhand information. That young officer did not have the experience or the ability to understand the battle. He was under pressure to see things as quickly as possible, and you can imagine the general right behind him was firing. What is it that you see on the left? What do you see on the right? The result, of course, you know, is that he lost the Battle of Waterloo. And some people claim, and I guess these are the poor losers in the Napoleon sphere, that suggest that maybe that wasn't the reason poor Napoleon lost the battle. We know that it was probably for other reasons. The Prussians came to the rescue of Wellington, but that's another story. The old-fashioned process of visualizing, and I come from the printing world before I joined the sign business, and I can relate to it, and I think it's valid in the sign business. You have to doodle. I know a lot of you right now are stuck in front of your computer, and you're forced to produce signs and quickly and succinctly and efficiently, but quite often you can get away from the computer. And I see it, I sense it often from designers that maybe they forgot something. Maybe there's something, it's after the fact, it's too late, and it goes through. Doodle. Carry a sketch pad beside you. Before you hit that screen, start doodling the old-fashioned way. And then you'll see that doing so, you can start envisaging different motifs, different ways of looking at it. A quick concept for exploratory discussions. My career is if I had and I'm proud of my career in the sense that I was able to develop an ability to quickly visualize something that was given to me by a client. These are the belated and regretted loss of the Montreal Expos, and I remember I worked on a few projects inside the Olympic Stadium, and one of the ideas was during rainouts to keep those cavernous halls busy is to create some kind of animation or some kind of thing to keep the crowds happy and keep going for popcorn and hot dogs. And we created this thing. This is before electronics of the kind that we have in the LEDs. It would have been a totally different thing. But this was based on strictly on micro switches. The idea was you'd had to have somebody, when the pitch is illuminated, the catcher throws to first base, you had to beat the pitch to first base, and how quickly you ran and touched that base. That was the idea behind it. It never caught on, but they wanted to see it quickly and how it might look. So that's the visualization of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This is another one that shows the bank wanted to use this lost, ugly space under a stairwell in a vestibule of a local skyscraper. And this is where ATMs were starting to come into play. And what can we do with that ATM to animate it, to make it look different? Can you come up with an idea? So boom, 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 sketch pad, and you come up with something. It either goes, it flies, or it doesn't, but at least it got you away from long discussions and you moved on. This was when Subaru was concerned with integrating their new rebranding. What would they do? How would they have Subaru identified before the main signs came? So we produced a bunch of these, or around 10 or so, very quickly, very simply, very easily, and with an ACM, push through, narrow, used LEDs with push through letters that we had in stock for other programs. And that was sketched out. Soon as it was sketched out, sent, emailed, it was approved, and we got an order to produce 10 of them in one shot. So sometimes it works out very quickly and very easily. When I was invited to help the Future Group out of New York to devise and develop a sign program or sign specs for their monoliths, there were many permutations, because you first had to deal with people that are not familiar with sign products. So it was while we're explaining this to them and their design intent, you had to go through various scenarios of how you can execute. You develop a dialogue, a sketching dialogue with designers that are not familiar. It's almost like teaching, and it requires a lot of patience, and you have to pick up immediately on what they want and show and discuss it and eliminate it to get them to where you want them to get. This was thrown at me a night before. This is just before Suncor bought Petro-Canada. They were thinking of getting rid of the name Sunoco and going for a Suncor. And then, of course, that all fell through. But this was prepared the night before for an executive meeting. I had just that several hours to do it, and I was able to bang them out very quickly with felt pens. If you master your techniques and your materials, you can then they wanted to visualize how they could possibly build them. They were fascinated with what we were doing with the shell program using CPM, cold press molding, and SMC, and if there was a practical way of building these signs like cookie cutters. And this was an of how to apply the asymmetric aspect of their logo, which was like a sun ray on one side, and how you would incorporate it on the other. So we borrowed from the Irving oil program that I developed, and it worked well. But then again, history changes quickly in the oil business. This shows you the preliminary sketch that I used in working with Whitewater in Kelowna, BC, to how to incorporate the chevrons on top and bottom of the push-through Irving letters through the RTM, resin transfer molding faces that were produced. Here again, one of our salespeople in Ottawa had this designer come up with this barrel concept, and how can this be illuminated? Of course, this is another one of those situations where it's a champagne idea with a beer budget. So with a few little sketches like that, you can save a heck of a lot of time in front of the computer and eliminate and save times and save the designing time for things with real purpose and a real direction. This was another little project sent to me by our good colleagues in Vancouver. Huge letters with this flower symbol. And they required, how would you build it? Because again, there are people in Kelowna were building the fiberglass components, but how do you assemble them? How would you put them? And this was quick concepts and how we would do the multi-layering of the lotus leaves, and how we would get the pollen middle of the flowers, and how you would produce it. So I envisaged a box, a free-form vacuum box, and designed it very quickly so that it could be. Of course, this fell through because of permit issues, from what I understand, but it was an exercise. And this is an important process. You have to imagine what an estimator would look like. It would look at something like that. You are asking him to design something, and because of the concerns that he would mess up, he would have the tendency to sort of add, and there'd be layers and layers of cost, and you would come up with a price that doesn't add up. This was in response to a design intent that the designers and architects at Adidas, they wanted a clean, crisp, floating look for the signs. So this is to show how the background of the channel letters would be dissimulated by in perspective view. You would not see that these letters are actually joined, because they're joined in the background. A quick sketch and a concept and an explanation like that to the estimator gives him an idea where he's at. In one fell swoop, he's able to get at least an idea of how to price this, and also it serves to showing the customer that we are getting close to his design intent. These are some concepts that never worked out, but they didn't work out, and it was fortunate because some of the logic behind it of how it could be done would have proven to be very, very, very costly. So the drawings serve at least the purpose of not going and venturing out into territories that would be too complex and ridiculous. Not all of the sketches come to fruition. The design head-on. And we'll be talking about that in the future, because I will talk about the retail visual identity, but this is an area. Why I stress you have to sketch and you have to be able to visualize, and you cannot just isolate yourself from the concept and from the technical aspects of it, because quite often your creativity will also manifest itself in coming up with a technical solution. The designer wants no visible seams. He doesn't want cemented joints. He wants this to be one piece. So I designed a tool that would thermoform this, and the method for miter cutting the formed piece and closing it so that it closes and comes together as one piece. And then it would slide into another piece. But this is a teaser for you, because we'll be talking about this when we're talking about fully integrated sign programs. This is just another view. I designed this thing in one afternoon, talking it over with our production people, and we had a fabulous team in the back that were able to take that and make a mock-up in no time flat. And we were able to produce that very quickly. The thing on the left that you see there is, again, it's going to relate to what we're going to be talking about in the future in a future module when we're talking about a fully integrated sign program. But quite often, as a designer, you have to explain to production how you envisage producing these letters and how you're going to install them. In this instance, because we are not the ones that made the canopy, we sent the methods of how we would incorporate the letters so that he could incorporate that into his ACMs. This one on the right shows you the principle of thermoforming, miter cutting, and folding the letters. This is another example of a champagne idea with a beer budget. The client wanted a 6-foot rotating bottle of perfume, and we looked at it and saw how we could do it. And this is the breakdown. So breaking it down on how you would do it, show the estimate, come up with the quick price. You didn't have to design it. You didn't have to take important design time. You were able to doodle the concepts because you had an idea of where you're going. You have a control, your knowledge of the materials and what it can do, what it will refract. And you come up with an estimate. You tell the customer it's going to cost you $1 bazillion. You say, oh, no, thank you. We'll go another way. This is an idea that a customer asked, is how we can transport and unfold a RGB screen. This goes back to about 98, 99, so it's close to 20 years ago when RGB screens became the thing. And it ultimately became a trailer. It was used, the concept was used to unfold. And it's an idea that didn't work out too well for legal reasons and whatnot, and the costs, and the fact that most stadiums and decided to go on for permanent. This was supposed to be used for special occasions, and the need did not correspond to the idea. Thinking out of the box means that you don't necessarily always have to confine yourself to what your shop can do. You can look outside for ideas, and you can develop as a designer. If you are curious enough, you can poke away, either Google it or look out. There's architectural magazines. I strongly suggest you subscribe. At my time, in my time as a designer, and I governed 6 or 7 designers. I had to subscribe to the British Sign magazine, to European Sign magazines, and I looked for ideas wherever I could. And here are some of the thoughts. This is a dinosaur made out of packages. Here is an example of thermoforming components for a billboard. And this particular one is if you have a knowledge of other materials and other sources. This is a situation where the customer, he demolished a heritage building, and the city came back at him and said, you don't have any right. You must restore this to its original size, and that corniche has to be, that trellis, that design has to be sculpted bas-relief. You have to restore it. They were at a loss. We found a solution for them, and the result of that, of us finding a solution and being able to accommodate him, we went outside, we went to a sculptor, and these are polyester fiberglass sculpted pieces by a real sculptor. And the customer was so enthralled with this that it resulted in a sale for another major sign program. Understanding installations. As I say, your creativity, your understanding of how to create and make a sign must also be able to understand how it is to be installed. I was often asked to show how a sign can be deployed on site, and to explain it to installers that when we were shipping signs, to demonstrate and to show them a way of how we saw the sign being installed, how it was our experience, and to relate to them how to put it. So I've done. These are the only ones that I was able to recover. But it gives you an idea that creativity and the ability to produce ideas is not restricted to just pretty signs or making signs and graphics and sign boxes, channel letters. You can do many things. Your learning of other materials can produce some extraordinary things. These are some examples made out of fiberglass. These are signs are not only available from sign companies, but you can go to people that produce movie sets. Like in this case, the company that I was in touch with, they produce movie sets. They produce all the airplanes for Jimmy Buffett's airplanes that he has suspended in his bars and restaurants. They're all done in Montreal. I have these friends. They're a resource for me. And they're also a resource for new technology. For example, these are polycarbonate pylons for Cirque du Soleil at a stadium presentation. And I asked them, how the hell did you produce these columns of clear polycarbonate and cemented them? Well, he answers, I used a soldering gun. I use a welder, a plastic welder. What are you talking about, a plastic welder? And he produces for me a plastic welder where he takes strips of polycarbonate, takes 2 pieces of polycarbonate, solders them together, and he produces this extraordinary monstrosity for Cirque du Soleil. So you will never know where your pencil will take you, and you'll never know who you're going to meet. And that is the result of sketching, of visualizing, and not restraining and restricting yourself to just your computer. Take a sketch pad beside you, a trusty old pencil, and sketch them out. You'd be amazed at what you can come up with. These are some attention grabbers from these same people. These are airplanes and sculptures made for presentations, for movie sets, and for museums. And you'd be amazed at what you can produce outside. Ideas, Mastering materials and techniques means working at it, using your curiosity, not limiting yourself to your little desk and your computer, looking outside. Enjoy the world outside. It's visual in so many ways. Next seminar, looking forward to talking to you in Module 4.